we'll do the best we can. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We have Kevin's on vacation. Rex was supposed to fill in, and he's not feeling well. So hopefully he gets better. And I'm just going to jump in and just show some more photos of our trip to Israel tonight to help fill the gap until Kevin gets back next week. Before we get started, Jim's going to lead us in a word of prayer. So, Jim.
We come before your throne in prayer to thank you for our very lives. Father, as we look to the world around us, and specifically Israel and the areas that we can see in photos, we pray that we can take in the physical aspect of this world, the things that took place so many years before our existence. We pray, Father, that you be with Eric as he brings us the things that he's seen with his eyes and has photographed for our learning. Pray that you be with all of the body of Christ, physically and spiritually. We have many that need your healing hand at this time. We pray that you would be with them, guide them, direct them back to their wanted health. Pray that you would be with each of us this hour. Go with us and guide us. We ask this in your Son's name, Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior.
Amen. All right, thank you, Jim. And for those of you who don't know, today is Jim's birthday. Happy birthday. So just a continuation of our photo journey here for our time in Israel. So we're on to Saturday, May 14th. And on that day, we go to the Mount of Olives, spend some time in Gethsemane, the Kidron Valley, do an old city tour, including the Holy Sepulchre and Hezekiah's Broad Wall, and we spend some time browsing in the Muristan Marketplace, and then we have an opportunity to visit the Israel Museum in the afternoon. So a pretty full day, very full tours, and a lot of fun. And so I'll just go ahead and jump in. So first off, with the Mount of Olives, so there's the Mount of Olives in the background. And this is not quite giving me the view that I want so I can see my notes. Bear with me for a second here while I figure out why I'm not getting that display. Any idea why that's not giving me the split view? If not, we'll have to wing it. But it'll be better with my notes. Let's just do it like this. Okay. There you go. Okay, much better. Thank you, Ken.
The Mount of Olives on the left or the right? Jerusalem on the right, isn't it?
So, your right or mine?
Your
Yeah. So we're looking back at the Temple Mount there.
you're talking about the picture on the right.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the morning, we drive down to the summit of the Mount of Olives. And after getting off, we walk down to a level of a massive Jewish cemetery that covers the southern end of the mountain. The view of Jerusalem was incredible, and it mirrors the view Jesus and his disciples had from around the same spot in the beginning of Matthew 24. So as you're reading through your Bible in Matthew 24, kind of just envision this right here. Very impressive thing. And I don't know if it's on this one here, so we'll go back. So can you see right down here maybe? Can you tell is that there's rocks right there. So the Jewish tradition is they put stones on top of the graves. So, and anybody know why that is? Theory?
Because they don't die or something, or there's something.
It's to help keep their spirits at the grave. So it's, yeah, it like weights them down, gives them a way to find their way back. I mean, I've heard different sort of iterations of why that is, but the general consensus is it's for the dead. It's for their spirit in some way. So it's kind of interesting. And we would see them around. And if you see, so this would be closer to us here. Those would be Jewish graves. And then as you get closer to the wall, the ones up in the wall up there, those would all be Muslim. So all Muslim graves. So thought that was pretty interesting, pretty neat. And you can see the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the black roof, the third holiest spot in Islam, right there. And that, if you've been following the news lately, that has been the source of friction again recently. So I think some holy days converged on each other this year, and some of the Muslims wanted to stay at that holy spot, and the Israelis didn't want them to be there overnight. The Muslims locked themselves in there. The Israelis stormed it. So, and then there was a whole bunch of friction that went on for several days. Don't know what it's like now, but I know an acquaintance, I don't want to say friends, I don't know him really well, but a lady I know through the insurance business here in the community, she's was on a cruise with her husband, and they were hoping to stop in Israel. She was looking forward to it, and the captain decided to just pass because it was too dangerous right now. So we were lucky. While we were there, we had no trouble at all, none whatsoever. But this was the source of a lot of friction recently. And then on the right is the Dome of the Rock. I think we're all familiar with that as well. So now I think, I'm trying to remember, Oliver and my father-in-law, I think you got to go into the Dome of the Rock, right? Yeah. We didn't, Cindy and I didn't get to do that. So, and then this just the tour right here. The Eastern Wall is in the back. The Golden Gate is in the background. So you have the Al-Aqsa Mosque off there to the left, the dome, and you have the Golden Gate right there off to the right in the back on the wall. And this was just our group, so we were able to get a group photo there. You can see it was a sizable group. And really good group. Always fun and enjoyable to do something like that and do it with a large group of Christians. So we all had faith in common. Now after the group photo, with Jerusalem in the background, we walked the Olivet ascent, the road to the Garden of Gethsemane. This road follows the land and is certainly the same route that Jesus and his disciples would have took when walking from Bethany on the opposite slope. So this, realistically, kind of walking down it, get the sense like this is where Jesus and his disciples, they literally would have walked here. Very likely. Also, David would have walked through there, and anyone else who went over the mountain in biblical times. So it's just sort of like walking through it, or enjoying the time walking down there, and you think about that. It's like, wow, Jesus, his disciples, all the people that we read about in the Bible, like if they were in this area, they literally would have walked right here. So I found that to be very meaningful. Just another view. So then we move over to the Garden of Gethsemane. Now the Garden of Gethsemane, what do you have in your mind? Big, beautiful garden? Small, tiny garden? Shrubs. Well, me, I had in my mind's eye, it has to be this big, grandiose sort of thing, right? Garden of Gethsemane. That's always been in my mind. Don't know why, just has. It wasn't exactly that. I mean, that's kind of it right there. We arrive at the Garden of Gethsemane next to the Church of All Nations. And the garden does have a number of olive trees, some which are centuries old. And the old trunks, you'll find new trunks sprouting from them. So that's how you can tell it's a healthy tree and it's growing. And you think about Isaiah 11, 1-2, the new trunks sprouting from the old trunks. So fruitful branches. But that was it. That's the Garden of Gethsemane. I imagine in Jesus' time it was much bigger. But for now it's very small. Another view from different angles of it. Very pretty, but again, very small, not large at all. Another view. So again, very picturesque. So then we move on to the old city of Jerusalem. And we exited across and crossed the Kidron Valley up to Jerusalem's Lion's Gate, or also known as Stephen's Gate, just above the northeast corner of the Temple Mount. And why the different names for the gate? So anybody know why? I have notes, I'll tell you why, but anybody already know? Okay. Here's the story that we were told, what we captured. Centuries ago, a sultan's family emblem was a panther, and they put that image around the gate. But people mistook it for a lion. So, yeah, it was a panther, but they call it the Lion's Gate. Centuries after Jesus, some people associated the gate with Stephen's stoning in Acts 7. And in Jesus' time, it was called the Sheep Gate, since the temple animals were brought in through there. So, the story of the gate. Very interesting to walk through the old city in Old Jerusalem. So, as we're walking through, this right here, in any idea, any thoughts of what this might be? I don't expect you to know it. I wouldn't have known it. What we're looking down at is where the pool of Bethesda would have been. That's the pool of Bethesda. John 5 tells us the story of Jesus healing a lame man at this pool, at this 5-porticoed pool. And on the dividing barrier sits a Byzantine church right now, and on top of that, a Crusader chapel. So things get built on top of things. And if this next photo here, I think, we have a depiction of what it may have looked like during Jesus' time. And if you can see right up in here, see that ladder down there? We're just trying to give you a visual as we look at it, like how deep it is and how much they build on top of things. So level would have been much lower in Jesus' time when the pool existed. But pretty neat to look at and just be able to put a visual to it. So then next we walk the Villa Dolorosa. So now this is the traditional route of Jesus to Calvary. It's just tradition. So we don't know this to be true. The route is defined by tradition rather than facts. Jesus' hearing before Pilate was very likely not at the Antonia fortress by the Temple Mount, but rather Herod's palace complex just below the Jaffa Gate on the western side of the city. Still, it was a nice walk. Interesting walk, interesting to walk through the city and just, see it. Now that said, as we walked through it, it was also very interesting. There were people that look at this as the literal walk, consider it very holy, and like they were walking and chanting in groups, like it was very important to them, took it very personal, and so it was really very interesting, contrast, because here we are walking, going, well, it's just tradition, it's kind of neat to look at, and then you have another group of people, it's like, this is it, like they're crying and wailing and just really having at it. We stopped for a few minutes in the Chapel of Flagellation to see some large paving stones left over from the Antonia fortress, including one with a game board etched by the soldiers into the stone. If you've ever been a soldier and you've been on guard duty, it can get pretty boring. So I can imagine the soldiers standing guard and just figuring out games to play. Herod the Great built a fortress in the northwest corner of the Jewish temple and named it the Antonia Tower after General Mark Antony, who supported his rise to the throne. After the first Jewish revolt in AD 66 to 70, the Roman general Titus destroyed the fortress. So we just stopped here and just took in, the scenery, so to speak. You can see there's ruts in the stones. That would be from all the wagons and carts coming through. It's really hard to tell. It shows up better, I think, if you look right here on this side. There's just marks etched in that stone there. That's where the guards would have been standing. And it's some sort of game that they figured they were just something to keep them entertained and occupy the time. I don't know exactly what it was, but that's what was pointed out to us. Along the traditional Via Dolorosa, or the way of the suffering. There are 14 stations of the cross. So they have the walk, and they have 14 different stations marked, and people would stop, and they mean something of significance. It's a winding route. It's about 600 meters, and this has been the current route, the recognized route, since about the 18th century, and has replaced, earlier versions of the route. Station 5 is where they say Simon of Cyrene would have, took on the burden of the cross. I think that's Station 5 right there. So, but again, this is just tradition, symbolic. We don't know that to be true. But interesting to see. Now, just more view here, and you can see pretty much everywhere you go in Jerusalem, and really anywhere around the country, you'll see soldiers and police security pretty much all over the place, and no different here. So they're just gathered together. There was a handful of them right there, just hanging out. Yeah.
Those stones were from the time of Jesus. That's soldiers.
Right there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did she say?
So the stones that the soldiers are standing on, we believe those would have been original stones and would have been around at the time of Jesus. Yeah, thank you. And it is an uphill walk. It's not terribly uphill. It's not like a super steep incline, but it is uphill. You are sort of gradually ascending. I would almost liken it to a little bit worse in some spots than others, but kind of like a railroad grade. Not super steep, but incline. So just more of a view here. And I think, Cindy, help me. I don't have any notes on this one, but was that cross? Were we just taking a photo of that, or was something? Yeah, that's a station. But was something supposed to have happened there? Do you remember what that was? Where was the one where they think that she wiped Jesus' brow? Yeah. Was that it?
So there's a tradition
Yeah.
that Veronica
Yeah.
wiped Jesus' brow with her veil.
Yeah. Would it have been this one? Is this what they were trying to say? Okay. Yeah. So their tradition is this would be where Veronica may have wiped, Jesus' brow. So,
Left an imprint of his face on her veil
and left an imprint. Yeah.
to heal Tiberius
Yeah.
and perform a miracle.
Yeah. Did you guys hear that? Yeah. So this would have been where tradition would say this is where Veronica would have wiped Jesus' brow and left that the cloth she used, it left an imprint of Jesus' face in the cloth, and that cloth was later used to perform a miracle. So, just traditions. Not saying I buy into it, but I think that's what that station was supposed to be. And I think we even watched, like people would do, and I think we have photos in here that'll show this. Like I think a young girl went up and kissed that cross, right? Like they believe this is very holy to them. So I'm very personal. So we end up at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the probable location of Golgotha. We go in via the roof, and we go through the Ethiopian community and their main chapel before coming out in front of the main entrance, and then we go inside. So we're going through the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and we get inside the Ethiopian community, and you can kind of see right here. So we go inside the Coptic church. This would have been the Coptic church of the Ethiopian community. Is a painting of Solomon with the Queen of Sheba, and their tradition is that Sheba bore Solomon a son and founded the Ethiopian royal house. This is how the Ethiopians laid their claim to this part of that area. And it's really interesting. There's a lot of different communities that have a stake in this area. So very, very interesting dynamic. Now, The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is located in the Christian quarter of the Old City of Jerusalem. It is one of the oldest churches in Jerusalem and has been torn down and rebuilt several times. Control of the church itself and sharing property over parts of the church are a complicated arrangement. As we saw, the main denominations are Roman Catholic, Greek Orthodox, Armenian Apostolic, Coptic, Syriac, and Ethiopian Orthodox churches. There are residences there and different levels of spaces where people live and pray. So very busy and constantly active area. They have lines drawn to divide it, and they set times for each other for worship and use. Even parts of the interior of the traditional tomb are divided. So a lot of stuff going on there.
So that's all the rock where you say, Eric, been rebuilt? We see all the buildings?
Yeah.
So they actually rip them down and rebuild?
That's what they say. It has been torn down and rebuilt several times. So then next we climbed the crowded steps to the top of the Golgotha rock. This, for me, was probably my least favorite part of the tour, because you get all of these people, and just think of this funnel. So we all got to get through that door right there. So, and you have this massive crowd of people, and what they were telling us when we were there, tourism had really just started to open back up again, so it wasn't as crowded as normal. And I thought this was very uncomfortable and sort of annoying. I can only imagine if it were 2 or 3 times more crowded, but you got this big mass group of people funneling down into this door to get up. So not very pleasant experience, and didn't enjoy that part. But it's neat to see it and go through it and say you did it. As you get up there, so to the right, so this photo right here is the traditional spot for Golgotha, or the place of the skull where Jesus was nailed to the cross. On the left, next to it, is the traditional spot of the crucifixion. An elaborate altar sits with an open area to look down at the hole in the floor where there is a fissure in the rock made from an earthquake. This is all the traditions. As you come down, here's the traditional spot where Jesus' body was prepared for burial. And you can see, and we saw this a lot, like even coming up here, it was hard to get to this spot to view the top of the rock, because people are crowded there. They're laying on the floor, you know, hugging it, crying, kissing the box. It really is just quite an ordeal to navigate through. So I think I may have gotten this photo by like sort of leaning over between 2 people and, you know, just sort of holding the camera out like this kind of deal, because it really is very crowded and people are crowding around it. And they're doing this, like even down here, this traditional spot for Jesus' body, they're laying on it, you know, hugging it, kissing it, putting their hands on it. And I think we asked, it was just me, I don't know if you remember, Cindy, but just asking Luke, is like, you know, what is with that stone? Like, is that supposed to be like an original stone or something? And he said, no, he said they take it out and replace it every once in a while. So it's just all about the tradition. So we're heading back down the stairs, and at the bottom, you can see the bottom of the rock, and you can see that crack caused by an earthquake. At least that's the contention, the crack, the fissure going up there. You can also see, as you walk through, the edicule marking the traditional tomb. So that would be the left. And you see how grand it is. It's very ornate. A lot of effort, a lot of work would go into assembling this. We crowded into a burnt-out Syrian chapel to see part of a real Roman period tomb in a hole in the back wall. More like what Jesus' body would likely have been in. This is an interesting story here, at least I thought it was interesting. But this goes to show you like the interactions and just sort of how things are so delicate over there with the different groups interacting with each other. So you see that ladder right there below that window? It's just a simple wooden ladder. That ladder has been there since 1750s. The story is no one can agree on who owns it. So they don't know what to do with it. So there it sits. So if you move it, you could cause a war, even though you don't know if you own it, or the other guy doesn't know if they own it. But it would cause a lot of friction and contention. So it's referred to as the unmovable ladder. There it sits, just right there. And if you look it up, you can find photos of it on the internet. They have actually literally moved it. I think they had to do some work, and there's a YouTube video I found where they show them actually moving it, but they put it back. So, and everybody knew it was going to be moved. So it was a very interesting dynamic in that area with the different groups of people. So we proceed from there to enjoy we basically go to the Johnny's. It's a trinket store, jewelry store with other trinkets. They fed us really cheap. We had a $3 falafel lunch, which is actually good. I found myself, I actually liked falafel. I didn't know if I would or not, kind of going into it, but it was actually pretty tasty. They fed us really cheap because they wanted you to be in their store and buy things. And that wasn't Cindy and I. We weren't interested much in shopping in the store, but I think they did pretty well. Some of the older ladies looked like they were spending a lot of money buying jewelry and stuff. So they made their money. So we had about an hour of free time to shop around in the old city and just walk around the market. And that was actually kind of fun. We did have one of the guys, they warn you not to get very far, pay attention to where you are, because it's very easy to get lost in the old city. And one of the guys, Rex, I think it was, he actually got lost. We had to go send out a search party for him as we were leaving. And his story was he was walking around, and it's pretty easy to do. You're just walking around enjoying yourself. It's fun. And he just thought he got turned around, and he's looking for Dejani's, and he asked somebody, hey, where's Dejani's at? And they tell him it's over here. So he goes over there. Well, apparently Dejani's is a chain, so they have multiple stores. So he went to Dejani's, but just not to the one we were at. We got lucky, found him real quick. He was actually ended up by the gate where we were leaving anyway. But we had a good time, and we get to tease him about it all the time now. So we exit through the Jaffa Gate, and we head out for the bus to head towards the Israel Museum. The market complex of streets and shops in the Christian quarter of the old city. That's called the Muristan Market. So we're just heading out. So this is coming outside the Jaffa Gate, and that tower right there looks really low, but it's sloped. That would be from Herod's time. So that would have been part of a defensive tower from Herod. So now moving on to the Israel Museum. Israel Museum was really very interesting, and in a lot of ways, I almost wish we would have done this on our first day, because they had a nice scale model there you can see, that you can walk around and kind of really get a sense of the city. So, but instead we had walked around for a couple, 3 days, not really knowing where we were and just trying to get it organized in your head. And this for me was like, oh, okay, this makes more sense now. So I kind of wish we would have done this first, but no matter what, it was just fun to do. It's interesting. They had a lot of biblical artifacts, and I have a couple of clips here, I think, in this section alone, where you'll get to listen to Luke, and he would show us some stuff and present on it. And so I think you'll enjoy that. And just another, flip of the temple and the scale model here. So just some more view of that. And I thought that was pretty cool. And again, like I said, I almost wish we would have went there first. Would have helped me. So Herod employed about 10,000 workers. Among them would have been priests and in the construction of the temple. So this is the ossuary for Simon. It's simple and unadorned, but its Aramaic inscriptions were carefully written in legible hand, one on the long side and one on the short side. It can be assumed that Simon was a skilled craftsman whose contribution to the construction of the temple earned him the title, at least in the eyes of his family, builder of the temple. So this is the Simon, builder of the temple and ossuary. So this one here, I thought we had notes on this one, Cindy. I don't see any notes. Wonder if it got lost in transition.
Have to read that.
Yeah, my eyes can't get that. So this column drum bears a Aramaic inscription, Hananiah, son of Doudalos from Jerusalem. It represents the first epigraphic testimony. So that would have been inscribed testimony. I think that's what epigraphic means. If anybody, word person, if you know what that is, epigraphic, I think. To the name Jerusalem, spelled, it says it some different ways, as it is written in Hebrew today, as opposed to a different. So basically, this is just the first marking, inscribed marking they found that says this was Jerusalem. So, fair enough. I know we had notes here. I must have had a saving iteration issue. And then the same one here. So this is another fragment ossuary of a sarcophagus lid that was found in a family burial cave in the cemetery of a large agricultural village. It originally bore the name of the deceased in Hebrew, but unfortunately all that remains of the inscription is son of the high priest. So just a piece of an ossuary, or ossuary sarcophagus lid in this case. These right here would be markings of David. So you have the horns. Right here you have on the left, a Philistine coffin, and then on the right, Canaanite gods. The Canaanites worshipped hundreds of gods. El, father of the gods, was depicted as a bearded old man wearing a divine headdress. His wife was Asherah, mother of the gods, who is usually shown in a long dress. The chief of god, Baal, the storm god, was portrayed as a young man with a horned headdress holding a mace, and sometimes represented by his symbol, the bull. Here we have just a jar containing a string of figs that was carbonized by fire in antiquity. So just figs. Here is possibly one of the kings of Israel during the time of Joab, so it's just the head of a small statue that was found. Here is the ossuary for Joseph, the son of Caiaphas, and I think I have a video here for you. So Luke is going to explain a little bit for us about this ossuary right here.
Fancy schmancy. And look at the designs. Come on around so you can see it. The inscription is Caiaphas, son of Joseph. Yes, it's the Caiaphas from Jesus' trials. This is his ossuary. And inside they found the bones of a man around his 50s or early 60s and a couple of women, I think. Family members probably using the same bone box. And it's a rich person's ossuary. So this is, we're pretty sure it's Caiaphas's bone box. The bones were taken out and reburied somewhere else. They're not in there anymore. But one of those connections with a specific person. The Pontius Pilate inscription, maybe you've heard that or read that, this is it. And we see here, there's up in Latin, Tiberius Caesar, the end of Pontius, Tius Pilatus. It's like a dedication stone for a new building, like a cornerstone. You know, this is built in the year when the mayor was this person, and you know, it's like in this year of Tiberius, and Pontius Pilate was, you know, it's that kind of a stone. They found it in someone's house upside down in like their floor. As later on someone had seen it, you know, in recycling. You know, this wherever the building was long gone. Some inscription, I don't know, but we're building my kitchen, so just put it upside down. And that's what, but this is the Pontius Pilate inscription discovered at Caesarea. And we're going to go there to Caesarea on the last day of our tour. Finally, this right here. You see a lot of other ossuaries. You see some are fancy for rich people. This is a poor person's ossuary. You can read the signs later. This is, until recently, the only physical evidence of crucifixion we've ever found in archaeology. This is actually a replica, but it looks exactly like the original's in a storehouse safe somewhere. It's a heel bone with a nail through it, found in Canaan. And it's until just recently, a few months ago, the only archaeological evidence we found of crucifixion. But this is someone's heel bone with the nail. Recently, in England, we found the second known example. Did anyone read about that? Fancy schmancy.
Okay, so got a little bit more than just that one ossuary, but as you can tell, if you can't tell, Luke is very knowledgeable. He's an archaeologist, a historian. So I'm sure you'll enjoy when he's here, the time with him, and feel free to ask him questions. He'll nerd out on you, so with all of his knowledge. So right here is the Tel Dan. It's a stele. It was discovered in 1993 in Dan. It contains several lines of Aramaic and details that an individual killed Jehoram of Israel, the son of Ahab and king of the house of David. It is significant that it offers proof of King David outside the Bible, so we have proof that he existed, and the fact that it was inscribed by an enemy of the Hebrews is even more ironic or supportive. So we have proof outside the Bible. If you said, this Bible thing, I don't know if it's true, well, here's some archaeology, and it'll help support that. So here's a high palace from Arad. It's standing, and this is just a replica, standing stones and 2 altars. It had been desecrated probably by Josiah, in use in the kingdom of Judah. Altars were tested, and one was found to have residue of frankincense, the other cannabis. And we ended up visiting Arad later, and I think I have, Luke will tell you a little bit about this.
A high place from a city called Arad. It's a city in Judah, south of Jerusalem, like down below the mountains of Judea. We might see it. But they found a high place, a worship center that was in the same pattern as the temple. There's a holy place and a holy of holies. Inside, there was a standing stone. There's actually a second standing stone, which is kind of missing. They have something there that's a replica. And 2 altars. Now, it had been put out of use, destroyed, desecrated, probably by Josiah, who destroyed the high places and restored worship of the temple. And so this was in use in the kingdom of Judah, with their having other places to worship, their high places, and this is one of them. This is the Holy of Holies in their temple in Arad.
So here's a couple of pictures of what he talked about earlier, the heel bone and an iron nail. So this is a replica of an original that was found in Canaan. That looks very painful. So very painful. I personally have had a rod put through my leg when they put me in traction, and it hurt. It hurt a lot. And they gave me a lot of drugs, and it still hurt a lot. So I can only imagine the amount of pain associated with that. So here, discovered in 1961 at Caesarea Maritima, and this is what he was showing earlier. It's the first archaeological find mentioning the name Pilate. The partial inscription reads, "To the divine Augusti, Tiberium, Pontius Pilate, prefect of Judah, has dedicated this." This was probably from a temple from the Augustan gods dedicated to the emperor of Tiberius. And I think this is the one he was referring to where they flipped it upside down. They found it in someone's home being used as like a tile, floor tile. So imagine that. But that's what they do there. I mean, you go to these tells and they're just cities built on top of cities, built on top of cities. They're just constantly rebuilding things, knocking things down. Another party conquers another party. They just build right over it. So not uncommon. This silver amulet bears the oldest copies of biblical texts known to us today. They are some 400 years older than the Dead Sea Scrolls. The amulets inscribed in the ancient Hebrew script were found rolled into tiny scrolls in a burial cave in Jerusalem. They were inscribed with a sharp, thin stylus no thicker than a hair's breadth, and thus deciphering the inscription was difficult. The lower part of the inscription has been identified as a version of Numbers 6, 24 to 26. "The Lord bless you and protect you. The Lord deal kindly and graciously with you. The Lord bestow his favor upon you and grant you peace." This formula, which forms part of a Jewish liturgy, is known as the priestly benediction. So these amulets, pretty significant find, and we made sure we took photos of it and documented it for our own remembrance. This here is a household idol that Luke uncovered during one of his digs. I forgot to get the name of the dig he was on, but kind of cool when you're walking around as an archaeologist and you go, hey, that's mine. I found that. So and here it is on display for the whole world to see. I got to go back. Remind me on that one, Cindy. Go back and ask him about that one again. What's that?
Oliver knows.
Do you know what that is, Oliver?
No, it's the double beak. The two beaks. Where's that dig? What's that called?
Oh, the dig. Okay.
Kirbet
Kiaffa.
Kiaffa.
Okay. Kirbet Kiaffa is where he would have found it. Okay. Very cool. Now, I have no idea how to spell that off the top of my head, so I'll have to go look that up and put it in my notes because I will forget. So now our final stop was St. Peter Kalagantu, Rooster Crowing Church, located on Jerusalem's western hill. It has an excellent view, which is probably why it was the ritzy district for the high priest and other important people of the time. Peter was somewhere in this area when he denied Jesus 3 times, hence the name. The Kalagantu Church is built over what may have been Caiaphas's house, though there's no way to know this with any certainty. The palace had its own private mikveh and a space below for detaining prisoners while they awaited their trials. There was also a street running by that Jesus most likely would have walked on during his trials. So I'll let Luke tell us about the area.
This is called the Church of Galacantu, which is Latin for the rooster crows, gallo canto in Espanol. It's a modern, it's like built in the 20th century. It's not an old building. But it's built on the spot that some believe is the house of Caiaphas. Other scholars think it's probably not. There's another house of Caiaphas further up the hill that is advertised as the house of Caiaphas. It's a rich house. It seems to have been used in part as a prison, which links possibly with Jesus because he was held briefly in prison during his hearings somewhere up on this hill. When he was first arrested in Gethsemane, you see the Temple Mount there, look past it, see those golden onion domed things? That's a Russian church right next to the Garden of Gethsemane. Go to the left and you have the Garden of Gethsemane, the Church of All Nations, which had that rock. I don't know if any of you went in there today. That's just to the left of that and down a little bit. But that's the area where Jesus was arrested, and he was brought up somewhere in this area for his first trials. Before Annas the high priest, Caiaphas the high priest, and the Sanhedrin. 3 different locations, but the house of Caiaphas, and that's somewhere in that hearing. It's believed that Peter was in the courtyard with some others, warming his hands by the fire, and someone said, hey, you talk like a Galilean. Were you with him? And Peter denied it. And then the second time, and then the third time, very emphatically. And then the rooster crowed. And Peter felt the guilt from that, of course. It was a turning point in his life. But that happened somewhere up here. Some believe it may have happened right down here under this building. And it may have been his house. Maybe. Others think the high priest's house would have been a little further up the hill, a better view. But this area was a rich neighborhood. We have private mikvahs up here, which suggests a wealthy high priest, your own private mikvah in your house. And I'm trying to talk with the different calls to prayer going on. Wow. Anyway, we're going to go through some of this, the dungeon. Come out down here. There are the ruins of some buildings, and there's a street, a first century street that Jesus likely walked on his way down from here to go see Pontius Pilate and Herod Agrippa, and then Pontius Pilate again. And so we're going to see those things. It's not a very long visit. We'll go in here, go into the dungeon area where Jesus may have been held, and then go out to the ruins out here. Then we'll come back up, restrooms, if you want to grab a coffee, whatever. Now this is
Okay. So you can hear the call to prayer in the background there. Anybody remember how many times a day that is? It was 5 times a day, I think. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And it's very unnerving when you're not used to it. It's kind of weird. So these are underground caves that were discovered in 1889. Their physical characteristics and their proximity to what is possibly Caiaphas's palace and their contiguity with the sacred pit or dungeon suggest a public jail, possibly where Peter and John may have been held at some point as well. So just some different views of what this would look like. It's just, you're in a cave, basically. And it goes down deep, so you can see that's the walkway down there. And we're looking down into a group there, so that would have been your cell where that group of people is. So then going back out, as you look at this right here, so these steps going up and down, and they had them gated off, so we couldn't go in there, but this is very likely a, part of the road or the travel way that, Jesus and the disciples might have walked through. Just another shot of it, another look. So, and I think that is it. And we're right up at time. So, perfect. I would take questions, but we're out of time. So, save them for Luke.